here at Grand Canyon, it's a mix. We're all different tribes who call this place home. And we've had a relationship with the canyon and even with each other for generations. A lot of our cultural knowledge comes from other tribes.
This is the Exploring the National Parks podcast with Dirt in My Shoes. My name is Ash, and I'm a former park ranger and the founder of Dirt in My Shoes. I think that the parks are best seen from the trail, and I'm here to make national park trip planning easy.
And I'm John. I carry the kids on the trails, I tell stories, and notice all the things that Ash doesn't care about much, like flowers.
Join us as we show you around America's spectacular national parks.
We're sharing our favorite places, fun facts, adventures, and misadventures.
And we'll even throw in a little trip planning.
Let's start exploring. So I have been learning something over the last little bit since Christmas time and everything is past. I've been learning what makes a good and fun puzzle.
You're such a pain. He bought me so many puzzles for Christmas, which I asked for.
Yes.
But you got me like all 1,000-piece puzzles, which are just not fun for me. First of all, it's too many pieces.
Well, I'm not sure that's exactly true, because I think given the right puzzle, 1,000-piece could be fine.
Says the man who never puzzles.
And has no interest in puzzling. But Ash did ask for a puzzle table and wanted some puzzles for Christmas, so I got her a bunch of puzzles for Christmas. But I just went to the store, and there's a store where we live that has a huge puzzle selection. And I thought, she'll want some really pretty landscape puzzles. If you puzzle a lot, you probably have already found the problem, because sky and foreground usually can be in landscapes somewhat uniform. And so there's this one puzzle that we're doing right now.
500 pieces of blank white for a cloudy sky.
Oh my gosh.
It's been this Machu Picchu puzzle that he got me, which is a really nice thought. But I've been cursing his name every time I sit down to puzzle, because there's either all white pieces for the sky because the sky was like cloudy, or all green pieces for the grass, and they all look the same. And I'm just like, curse you, John.
Yeah, so like 500 pieces are all really bland looking colors. And so over the past week or so, I've been staying up late at night to finish the sky so that Ash can come back to her puzzle and maybe enjoy it a little bit, because the Machu Picchu part of Machu Picchu is actually really cool and it looks like it should be kind of fun to put together for her. But I had to put in the top, the bottom, and anyways, if you puzzle, just know I feel like I'm joining the club of puzzlers and I've learned a few things to maybe help me appreciate puzzling and what makes a good puzzle, which I never thought that I would ever learn.
And to just let your wife pick out her own puzzles.
But I'm
just kidding.
That's not how Christmas works.
I know. Well, in our house, it kind of is.
Sometimes it does.
Oh, no. It was a really nice thought. And hopefully I will be done with the Machu Picchu puzzle soon.
Yes.
So I can move on to something else that's more fun for me. But whatever. Yeah. It's fine. It was a nice thought. Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Thank you for putting together the sky pieces. That means a lot.
Also, putting together the sky pieces while rewatching Fast and the Furious movies does not mean for productive puzzling. So, in case anybody is wondering, don't watch movies while you puzzle.
That's why it's mid-February, and I'm still on the first puzzle that I got for Christmas.
Yes, so. It's Vin Diesel's fault.
Sure. Oh my gosh. Well, we're excited for this episode today. Actually, I'm really excited because we interviewed another park ranger.
Love rangers. Rangers are the best.
Yeah, so this one is really cool. Today we are talking to Ranger Kelkiyana Yazzie from Grand Canyon National Park. And what's cool about Kelkiyana, I mean, I'm sure there's lots of things that are really cool about her, but in specifics, her job with the National Park Service right now, it's called the Tribal Program Coordinator. Mm-hmm. And she's a member of the Navajo Nation. And what a lot of people don't know in the national parks, and there's a big push for this in the National Park Service right now, actually, trying to kind of reclaim some of the names and the history and all that goes along with these tribes that traditionally lived in these national parks well before they were national parks.
Right.
And there's can be a really sordid history when it comes to this. But Kelkiyana does an awesome job today talking to us about just the importance of the Grand Canyon to these tribes and what she does for the National Park Service at the Grand Canyon, what her job entails, and all that goes along with that.
Yeah, this was such a fun conversation. I absolutely love it. Super looking forward to sharing it with you. And hopefully you'll learn some really cool things about Native American history, current cultural connections with the Grand Canyon itself, and just everything that goes along with that.
So without further ado, here is our interview with Ranger Kelkiyana from Grand Canyon National Park. All right, everyone. So we are here with Kelkiyana Yazzie, and she is a park ranger at Grand Canyon National Park.
Woohoo!
We are so excited to talk to her today because I think a lot of people don't realize that there are some really cool jobs in the National Park Service that maybe you don't even know is a real job or like even a possibility. And I think she has one of those jobs right now. So welcome, Kelkiyana. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited about this.
We're so excited. So if you just want to start off by explaining to us what you do at the Grand Canyon, what your job description is, and we'll just go from there.
Yeah, so here at Grand Canyon, I work as one of the tribal program coordinators. So that's just another word for a tribal liaison. We work with the park's 11 associated tribes to make sure they're represented authentically and respectfully within the park, within our traditional homelands. I'm a tribal member myself, member of the Navajo Nation. So it's really important for our voices to be elevated in these spaces that are considered our ancestral homes. So that's what I do here at Grand Canyon. I previously worked as an interpretive park ranger here in the South Rim Village District for about 2 years. And then I've been in this role for about a year now.
Nice.
You mentioned the interpretive job. That's what most people think of as a park ranger. So that's the one that like you're doing those programs and sometimes you're giving tours or whatnot. You know, you're the face of the park basically. And so that's really cool that you were able to do that first. What made you want to switch from interpretation over to being part of the tribal program?
Yeah, so as an interpretive park ranger, as you mentioned, we're the front-facing employees who are here in the park. And we provide ranger programs for park visitors. And my ranger programs focused on indigenous perspectives of the Grand Canyon. So we would give a geology talk, but I would talk about it from the perspective of the tribes, talking about the alcoves that were used in the canyon for homes to build the cliff dwelling structures in, and talk about the importance of different minerals like the salt and the red ochre that's in the canyon for tribes. And yeah, it's just a passion. And I would talk about just the general cultural connections of the Grand Canyon that the 11 tribes have. And I really, really love talking about it. That's my passion, to share that with park visitors. And every single visitor is very impacted by that. They come up to me and say like, wow, I've been to all 400 plus national park units across the country, and I've never attended a ranger program by a Native Park Ranger about Native voices. That's what I really liked about being an interpretive park ranger, but it was one thing talking about it, and then another thing actually being part of the work that the park's doing with tribes. So that's what made me make that shift, is like, I want to actually be part of that work, engage with the tribal communities rather than just talking about it. Nothing wrong with telling the story, but definitely very rewarding and impactful to be actually part of the work.
Something that Ash and I have talked about on multiple episodes, I think, is, when you go to the national parks, a lot of times nowadays, you're kind of seeing things in an unnatural state in a lot of ways because you're seeing things in a people-less way. And so it's really interesting hearing you talk about, the connections with the 11 tribes and things like that, is because even now, when we go to the Grand Canyon, unless we're seeing someone telling the perspective, we're still seeing it in an unnatural, people-less way, where there's no people living there right now. And so I think that's so cool what you do, and illustrating that and sharing, your perspective. And I don't know, the liaison position has got to be super interesting working between the different cultures.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, it's very rewarding, and it's important to have both components where we're actually doing the work, but it's also being shared out, because every time I work with tribes here, they always call this a living landscape. And like you said, in general, when you visit national parks, you see it as just the land itself, when in reality, humans have had relationships with this landscape for generations. And everything that you're seeing has some type of human impact with it, or some type of human relationship with what you're seeing here.
Well, and I want to say, I think Grand Canyon actually really leads the charge on this in a lot of ways. I remember just even from the very first time that we went to the Grand Canyon many, many years ago, remembering the Desert View Watchtower and having that there and having kind of more of a nod to the native peoples of the area. But I would imagine that your job now probably, because it's crazy what's going on out at Desert View right now. It's so cool just how it seems to be really building as a cultural center in the park. I know that they do programs there now I was just looking online, this week they have a Hopi beater and a Hopi weaver and, bringing people in and showing their culture and their craft and being there to talk to and stuff. I don't know. I can't think of another national park. I have a couple of smaller examples in my head, but I really think Grand Canyon is where it's at as far as really getting the word out to people that this land belonged to the natives and letting us get to see that side of it.
Yeah, here at Grand Canyon, there's various interpretive opportunities to learn from rangers about the 11 tribes. Like you mentioned, the cultural demonstration program that's out at Desert View with the different artists, weavers, pottery makers, the list goes on. And we actually expanded that to the North Rim. So if you visit the North Rim, they have the cultural demonstration program there too at the lodge.
Do you do part of that?
So not me personally, but my mom and my sister, my grandma, generations before them are all weavers. They weave Navajo rugs. It's very time consuming and a lot of work and effort. I would watch my great grandma actually spin the wool that she's raising from the sheep. So yeah, it's a lot of process.
Wow.
So I give a lot of credit to them.
That's amazing. And I would imagine as a tribal program coordinator at the Grand Canyon, you probably are coordinating some of those programs and stuff. What specifically do you do to form those connections?
Yeah, so I'm the interpretation liaison. So I help connect our interpretive staff to tribal communities in many different ways. We're doing more wayside developments here in the park. There used to be a sign by the Bright Angel Trailhead that said, prehistoric people used to hunt and gather here. And we're like, well, we're not prehistoric. We still exist today. So, yeah.
Right.
That's so funny. That's when, if someone says to Ash, ma'am, she's like, I'm no ma'am. I'm not old enough for that.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more extreme than that. But it's
yeah, we still exist today. We're right here. But yeah, so just working on projects to switch out signs like that, to change that dominant Euro-American pioneer and explorer narrative that's existed here since the park was created, and bringing forward these other stories that have always been here. So that's a big project that we work on.
One thing that I saw that I thought was super cool, I'm a big fan of explorers, and so I loved the story of John Wesley Powell going down the Colorado River and stuff, but I saw this picture, and I think it was at the Desert View Watchtower, where there was an individual who was painting the story of the first Native American person that went down the Colorado River. And it was either, I don't remember if it was 40 or 400 years before John Wesley Powell, but I was just I can totally see someone. I don't know if it was a teenage Native American boy, I could see myself if I was living in the canyon being like, man, I'm going to build something. I'm going down that. That'd be so cool.
Exactly. Yeah, Colorado River is intense.
So you were talking about changing out the signs. And so I have to ask you, because it sounds like you were at Grand Canyon when they actually changed the name of Indian Garden to Havasupai Gardens. What was the experience of seeing that changed out, and what's the significance of that?
Yeah, I was able to help coordinate the commemoration ceremony that we had last year up by the Bright Angel Trailhead. where we actually invited descendants of Havasupai family to actually live down there when they were unfortunately forcibly removed from that space to make this area a national park site. And even though us as living tribal members didn't experience something traumatic like that, it still affects us through generational trauma. So it was really special to see these Havasupai tribal members see that name change because it's part of our healing process with that. So it was a really special moment, and it was really great because with this name change, it was supported by everyone, by the other 10 tribes, by the park, the superintendent. They all want to make this happen. And we went through the process of the U.S. Board of Geographic Names to get this done. And it was all done by the request of the Havasupai tribe. Like, they're the ones who initiated and wanted this done. So it was really great to see those people who were part of that process and how emotional that was. And one of our interpretive rangers actually recorded it and made this series called Min and Out in It. So it's on YouTube if you look up Grand Canyon, and you'll hear directly from the Havasupai tribal members on what that ceremony meant to them and that name change.
Yeah, I remember I watched one of those videos and I thought it was super interesting. And I think one individual in particular that I was really kind of moved by was, I think her name was Diana Sue White Dove Ukwala, I think was what her name was.
Yeah, you're right.
If I got it all properly. She was so neat. I thought watching her talk was so neat. And she talked about the red ochre that you mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I loved, like, she took a pilgrimage down. I thought the word pilgrimage was really neat because I think a lot of people use that word and they don't necessarily realize it can be applied to things besides Euro-American culture or, some type of a Judo-Christian worldview. And so it's like, this place, this is their pilgrimage going back to Havasupai Gardens. And it's super neat because it's their connection, it's their special heritage. And I just liked the word pilgrimage being used in that context. I thought that was really neat.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a word that they use themselves. And her brother, James Equala, last year actually went down every full moon, like every month, every full moon. He hiked down and would hike back up. And that was his pilgrimages. He does his prayers and offerings at that site. And the Park Service accommodates his stay. He stays in one of the ranger stations down there. And we do what we can to support it. And he talks to every single person on the trail. And he invites the park staff to come along with him. It's awesome.
Well, and anybody that's ever hiked down to Havasupai Gardens knows that it's a very physical pilgrimage too.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
It's hard to get down there.
Yeah.
Easy to get down, hard to get back up.
Yeah. Optional going down, but mandatory to come back up. That's what we always say.
Well, and for those of you listening that don't know what we're talking about, I guess maybe a little more context is Havasupai Gardens is along the Bright Angel Trail. So it's one of the main trails down into the bottom of the canyon. I would say probably the busiest trail going down into the canyon because there's water along the way and stuff. They have it set up pretty nicely for hikers. But Havasupai Gardens, you're not all the way down at the bottom of the canyon yet. You're on a shelf. So you go down a ways. Like John said, coming back up out of there, that was the worst part of hiking the Grand Canyon for me, honestly. It's like from Havasupai Gardens to the rim because it's just switchback after switchback after switchback. It's hard. It's a very hard section of trail. And a lot of people, I think, view Havasupai Gardens as what it is, really, is an oasis in the desert, somewhere to rest and somewhere to rejuvenate. And so, as you mentioned, there are people who have been using that area for many, 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 many years, who that was a very important part of their life, and people who actually lived right there because it is an oasis in the desert. And so I really love that Grand Canyon was able to facilitate that change, that name change from something that was offensive to those people and change it to something that's more of a nod to them and their family who lived there for so long. So,
yeah, and in addition to that, there's actually signage that our staff's been working on with the Havasupai tribe that's going to be down there at Havasupai Gardens. That's all from their perspectives. And it's not only written in English, but also the Havasupai language. So we're really working to bring that present back. And our superintendent actually has a dream to start gardening down there again.
Oh, really? That would be
Yeah.
awesome.
Nice. What does the Havasupai language look like written?
Oh, gosh.
You'll have to hike down to the sign, John.
Yeah.
Okay, I can do that.
Yeah, I'll find out that way.
Okay, sounds good. That makes a lot of sense. When we've gone to Hawaii and when we read Native Hawaiian, I have the hardest time, but it's still written in like, English letters. And so I was just wondering if maybe Havasupai, the native language, is still written in Romanized letters.
Yeah, it's very similar.
Okay, I'll be able to look at it, but I won't be able to pronounce it, probably, is the situation.
Yeah, you could try.
But the gardening is really neat because they've done that in a few other places, like at Pipe Springs. They have a garden there. I saw it was like a native Paiute woman takes care of a lot of the gardening there. And so would it be pretty similar at Havasupai Gardens to have a lot of the heritage vegetables or beans or squashes and things like that? Is that what you would envision being grown down there?
Yeah, that's being thought about, like melons and different things, like beans. But we're just trying to think, like, as you mentioned, it's really difficult to get access to that. It's a long way down, a long way back up. So that's something we're thinking about, too, is how we're going to help maintain that if that happens.
Yeah, for sure.
When Ash and I first got married, we were part of a community garden. And the community garden, it took about 15 minutes for us to drive to. And we realized after about 3 weeks of gardening and weeding 15 minutes away that we just abandoned our vegetables.
It was too far.
Oh, no. Driving to it.
I can't imagine having to hike 4,000 feet of elevation in order to garden and take care of your vegetables.
Yeah.
Those squash are on their own.
Yeah, exactly.
And we'll see what...
We'll see what happens. We'll be back in 6 months.
Yeah, so we'll figure something out.
Yes, exactly.
On your own.
Figure out a way to put that up on a drip system, just like the natives had. The Havasupai had 400 years ago. They had a drip system.
I'm sure they did have some type of irrigation, though.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what's so cool about seeing these native sites is it's like they can live off the land so smartly. It's amazing. So
yeah, very resilient.
Probably a way to have it water itself mostly. Honestly, John.
For sure.
And talking about the name change from Indian Garden to Havasupai Gardens, I've been thinking about this a lot because Great Smoky Mountains National Park just initiated a big name change as well, which is they're changing the name of Clingman's Dome back to the Cherokee word for that mountain, which is Kawohi. And so changing out all the signage and stuff. And it takes a little bit of time for us to get used to those changes. But like, how cool is that that's something that's happening among other national parks too? Just like there's kind of a movement, I think, in that direction to change a lot of these names back to the native name for it. I'm just in the audience clapping so hard because it's so fun to see those changes happen.
Yeah, definitely. And just addressing terminology in general, like I mentioned the cliff dwelling earlier, we're refraining from calling those like ruins or abandoned because they still have a living connection and meaning to tribal members today. Even though they're not physically occupied, they're still believed to be spiritually occupied. And it's a place that we honor our ancestors who come before us because these places sustained them. And without that, we wouldn't be who we are today. So that's the importance of these ancestral sites like that. And just using the respectful terminology to honor that connection. You're going to see more parks picking up on that.
Oh, I hope so.
I had a question for you. Are a lot of the tribes that are connected to the Grand Canyon, are they mostly considered ancestral Puebloan, kind of like some of the Mesa Verde and Chaco cultures are kind of considered ancestral Puebloan, or are there a few different, I guess, ways to kind of meet in the middle at the Grand Canyon, I guess? Are there a few different cultures that kind of meet in the middle here?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a couple of tribes do fall under that category of ancestral Puebloan. That includes the Hopi and the Zuni. And then the other tribes really don't. Like with my own tribe, Navajo, we're considered Athabascan. It's said that we've migrated from an area further up north from here to this area several hundred years ago. That's one of the theories.
That is super cool. the word Athabaskan, I just thought that was so cool because that's super far north. That's not just like, northern Utah. Athabaskan, that's like, that's a major migration.
Yeah, for sure.
That's Canada. That's amazing.
Yeah. So we're not considered Pueblo, and like the cliff dwellings you see at Mesa Verde, that's not usually associated with Navajo people. And that's where that term Anasazi comes from, is Anasaza, which means ancestral other people, referring to those sites.
Oh.
So yeah, here at Grand Canyon, it's a mix. We're all different tribes who call this place home. And we've had a relationship with the canyon and even with each other for generations. A lot of our cultural knowledge comes from other tribes, especially with Navajo. We get a lot from Hopi and vice versa. It's a great cultural hub here at the canyon with the Colorado River and the resources that are here.
So I have to ask then, what is your favorite thing about your job right now?
I think my favorite part of my job is working with tribal youth. It's just really special to see them connect to this canyon in ways that that our ancestors prayed for, especially with just the history of the park, keeping Native people out of this space for the past 100 years or so, until we started creating positions like tribal liaisons to welcome tribes back to the park. And just seeing the tribal youth be so inspired and be so engaged to their cultural heritage of this place, it really makes my heart happy and makes me believe I'm in the right place, doing the right thing. And mentorship's really important to me, because without my mentors, I wouldn't be where I am today. I have Indigenous leaders, one of them being the superintendent at Pipe Spring now. She's the first Navajo woman. She just accepted the position 2 months ago. And it's just really inspiring to see her in those leadership roles, as well as, Chuck Sams, our current National Park Service director, who's of Indigenous descent, as well as our Secretary of Interior, Deb Holland. He's from one of the Pueblos in New Mexico. And yeah, that's just the big thing I really enjoy about my job, is seeing ourselves in these spaces, working for the Park Service, and inspiring that next generation to come forward. And just to provide a quick example, this past summer, I got to participate in the Yavapai Apache Youth River Trip. It was the first time the Park Service supported a trip like that, where we brought Indigenous youth down the Colorado River. The first days, they're like, oh, what are we doing down here? And then within the end of the trip, they're like, what? We have to leave? When we went to the confluence, we shared this message of treating it with respect, because it's considered the ancestral resting place of different tribes. And then all of a sudden, the commercial river trip showed up, and they were really loud and stuff. And the kids were like, can we go tell them to be quiet and tell them why? So it was really cool to see them to share that message with the commercial boat passengers. And the passengers listened and respected that. And we all still were able to have fun in that space, but also just being respectful.
That's awesome. As a river rat myself, I really appreciate getting kids on the river and throwing them in the water and doing some really fun whitewater stuff and things like that. So that's super neat. Where is the confluence that you're referencing, though? Because what I'm thinking of, my favorite confluence is up in Canyonlands, where the Green and the Colorado come together. Where's the confluence that you're mentioning?
Yeah, this one is where the Little Colorado River and the larger Colorado River come forward. I don't know the specific river mile, but it's between Lee's Ferry, where most people enter into the river at to do a trip down the Grand Canyon, and then Phantom Ranch, which is another popular spot. So it's right in the middle of that somewhere. But the confluence, yeah, it's a spiritual place especially for the Hopi people, because that's considered their place of emergence, as well as their ancestral resting place when they leave the physical world.
Cool. And what a cool experience to be able to take those kids down there to see it and connect with it, because it only takes a very small amount of time to feel that connection with these places.
Mm-hmm.
And then you chase that for the rest of your life, basically.
Pretty much.
Always trying to find that connection again and feel that on a more normal basis. So that's really cool. And what a cool part of your job to be able to pass that knowledge on and be a mentor to so many people as well.
It's probably a real challenge. I'm thinking myself personally, the predominant culture is I feel like as a dad myself, getting my kids to recognize what's really important sometimes is so hard. It is just like, turn off your screen. This is what matters.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this for a minute. And then they're like, okay, Dad,
You're the worst.
And so it's such a challenge.
Mhm.
So I'm sure your position is very rewarding when you do see that you're making a big difference that way. So thanks for doing that, by the way. And good job.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I want to just pivot a little bit. I think it's super cool. Like I mentioned, you have a job that I think a lot of people just don't even realize exists as an option for a park ranger. How did you get your start with the National Park Service? Because you don't just kind of jump into a job like that. You usually have to start somewhere else.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm actually a fourth generation park ranger. My great grandpa was one of the first Navajo park rangers at a park I used to work at on the Navajo Nation.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's called Navajo National Monument that protects 3 ancestral cliff dwelling sites. Yeah, so it's been in my family, my great grandpa, my aunt, and then now me. And we all work there. And I just always remember seeing my aunt come home from work wearing the ranger uniform. And I just thought it was the coolest thing. And I was like, I want to do that. So I went to school for environmental studies up in Durango, Colorado at Fort Lewis. I love that place.
I was an environmental studies major as well.
Oh,
That's
nice.
super cool.
Yeah.
Yes, go team.
Yeah, so that's a very popular degree for park rangers. We always get asked that, like, what degree do we need? And honestly, anything. But environmental studies is a very popular one. But yeah, and I also did youth conservation corps. So I grew up right next to the park that I first worked at. I lived 5 minutes down the road, drive by it all the time. And I was just like, why are all these people visiting these old houses in the canyon? Like, what's bringing them here? But when I did youth conservation corps, I immediately learned the importance of that place. And it helped me reconnect to my own Navajo heritage, being a part of that work, because just seeing that connection these people had to the landscape and continue to have. So that's a big part of many indigenous cultures, especially Navajo and Hopi and people of the Southwest, is our relationship with the land. So yeah, that's what inspired me to start seasonal at that park. I gave cliff dwelling tours. And then I was stuck as a seasonal. It's the whole federal hiring process. Trying to get a permanent job. I think we all understand that. But I did pathways. So I went back to school to get my master's degree in Parks and Recreation Management. And I got to go to school and work for the park. And once I got my degree, I got hired as a permanent due to National Park Service Pathways program. That's how I ended up where I am at today. I wanted to stay at Navajo. That place has my heart and soul, especially with my family history there too. But I just reached my developmental growth there. Like if I stayed there, I would have stayed as a GS5 park guide. And that's the best they could offer me, unfortunately. And so I made the tough decision to go elsewhere. Fortunately, Grand Canyon picked me up, so I'm not too far from home, about 2 hours. And I'm learning all I can here.
But 4 generations, though, that's super cool. So that's like the Park Service is in your blood for a very long time.
Yeah, it has been.
Which is so fun. So the only thing that I can say even comes close to that is like my grandfather was a Boy Scout and my dad was a Boy Scout and I'm a Boy Scout and now my son is a Boy Scout. And it's just like, there's some things that you just want to keep going through the generations a little bit. And the Park Service being one of them, that's so neat.
That is cool.
That is such a cool thing to, who knows, maybe it'll be 5 generations.
Yeah, we'll see. My little niece is already looking at it.
Your niece is starting to consider.
Yeah, she's in kindergarten. And
she's filling the draw to the green pants.
Mm-hmm.
It's a strong draw for a lot of people.
It really is, yeah.
I would think it would be the hat. I think the hat's probably what would do it for most kids these days.
Yeah.
I don't know. The hat can be a little cumbersome. But yes, it's very iconic. I guess my question is, because we get this question a lot, is like, what piece of advice would you give to someone who wants to work or get their start with the Park Service? You mentioned like that jump from like seasonal to permanent being kind of a notoriously hard thing to do, which a lot of us have experienced who have worked for the Park Service. But just getting a start, you mentioned a few different programs there as you were talking about yourself and programs you've used. But what would be your advice to somebody who's wanting to get started?
Yeah, so what helped me was doing these different things like the Youth Conservation Corps. I don't know if that still exists, YCC. Might be called something else now. But here in Arizona, they have the Arizona Conservation Corps, all these different organizations that seasonal work for students or youth to get involved in. And here at Grand Canyon, we have one through Conservation Legacy called Scientists in Parks. And right now we have positions based at the North Rim where they help with different things like giving ranger programs. This past year, we have bison on the North Rim. So every year we do a bison live capture and transfer, and they got to help out with that.
I love bison.
Yeah. Have you been to the North Rim?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I was waiting for a question to like polarize all of the people listening. I was going to eventually ask you what rim is better, or which one is your favorite. And so that way we could, cause some disruption. But no, I love the bison in the North Rim. They're so cool.
Yeah. They're awesome. So, but yeah, they get to get experience in working on different projects like that. And the people who've been working there, they're actually rangers now. Because even though that was just a seasonal job, they work as rangers in the park or rangers at different parks. So those are great stepping stones to starting a career with the Park Service. You usually get something called the Public Land Hiring Authority, where you get preference over other applicants because you participated in something like that. So yeah, there's different ways to navigate that whole federal hiring process and the barriers that come with it. And the big one is getting involved with opportunities like that through the Conservation Corps. I think there's the American Conservation Corps, and they usually give educational awards too. So like scholarships to help you if you're going to school.
Yeah. After I stopped working as a park ranger, I actually worked for American Conservation Experience, which is one of those companies that runs programs like that in the park. And so we would place interns into the national parks. And a lot of them get hired after doing their internship and stuff. So it really is like the perfect way to get your foot in the door is to actually work amongst the people who kind of make those hiring decisions later too. So all of those programs you mentioned, it's an awesome way. But sometimes you have to be willing to not get paid very much.
Oh, yeah.
To get started.
Yeah, even volunteer work. Some of the best people I've ever met in my life are volunteers in national parks. And they're great. And they get a lot of experience too. One of my former colleagues, that's how he got his ranger job. He put in so many hundreds of hours of volunteer work until they just finally hired him. So there's that. And I would encourage talking to employees too who work at the park. I remember talking to the superintendent of my old park, asking him about the job. And I always remember him saying, like, it's just something new every day. It's something different every day. And that's always kind of stuck with me.
I can imagine in those periods of time early in the career when you're not getting paid very much, a community garden at Havasupai Gardens might be really necessary, for some of those starving national park ranger people that want to get...
Put the interns down there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We're not going to pay you very much, but we do have a garden that you can get food from whenever you want.
I can't beat that.
Listen, though, if you want to be a park ranger, you got to do some stuff like that. I mean, a lot of people get their start volunteering. You're making it a joke, but it's kind of true. It's like, you know what? I'll take the garden. I just want a job.
Yeah. And like we mentioned earlier, get paid in sunsets. That's what the park ranger life is.
Yes. Yeah. You get paid in sunsets. But what a great life. Oh, man. I pretty much think your job is just so cool and very unique. What an amazing thing that you do at Grand Canyon. Now I want to kind of talk more about Grand Canyon itself. If you don't mind answering some questions for us from your perspective, having lived in that area and just the unique job that you do there. We've talked a lot about the native people and that aspect of the Grand Canyon, and maybe this will kind of go into this question as well. But what for you do you feel like makes Grand Canyon National Park so special?
I think it's the draw that it has on people. And I really like going out onto the rim and just walking along the rim trail sometimes and just like witnessing and hearing people's experiences for seeing it for the first time. Like, it's just, even I see it all the time, which I try not to take for granted. But gosh, just looking at it and being immersed and being here, it's no other feeling that you get anywhere else. And yeah, I think that's the big thing. Is just what makes Grand Canyon special. Because, yeah, there's nowhere else like it in the entire world. It's one of the natural wonders of this planet. And, yeah, you just have to be here to experience it. I know some people see it as a big hole in the ground sometimes, but I think that's very rare.
I've never understood that. I'm like, oh my gosh.
There's so few places throughout the national park system where you can have so many people from all over the world meet in like one spot. And like the rim, especially like viewpoints like Mather Point, like that's like usually the first spot that people see. And it's like, this is a real melting pot right here. People from all over, all different cultures, all different languages, and we're all seeing it at the same time and enjoying it at the same time. It's just so neat that way.
Yeah, that's a whole other feeling on its own. And then just being able to try to share, like we just talked about, the different native connections to this place and share that with people here too who visit from all over the world so they can understand it from a different perspective, that viewpoint that's existed here for generations. So yeah, I think that's what makes the Grand Canyon very, very special. That's why it has its name.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and like John said, you know, it's like I've been interested to find out that like a lot of people don't even realize that visiting the Grand Canyon, like that's on everybody's bucket list. Everybody wants to visit the Grand Canyon before they die, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like a lot of people don't realize the Grand Canyon, at least this part of the Grand Canyon, is a national park. So that's like a change working in the national park space, because it's like usually people, like when they come to Yellowstone or they come to anywhere else, they're like, you know, we're here to see the national park. Whereas when they're coming to Grand Canyon, it's like they don't even, in most cases, don't even realize it's part of a national park, which I've always thought gives it just like a really unique vibe. It's totally different than a lot of other national parks because of that. And it really does bring in different types of people and people from different places that you're not going to see at a lot of other national parks, just because the Grand Canyon is on everybody's bucket list.
Yeah, and there's different ways to experience it too, whether that's here on the rim, hiking down into the canyon, doing the river trips, going on the North Rim. Yeah, the North Rim's actually my favorite rim, just to answer your earlier question.
I was going to say, are we going to go there?
That's awesome.
But yeah, so there's just so many different experiences, you know, being here at the national park. And I think you're right. People don't realize it. But on the other hand, it's kind of unfortunate that they don't realize it because we have so much wildlife here, one being the elk. And I've actually seen like a dad putting his child on the back of an elk.
Oh my gosh.
Like treating this place like a zoo.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's insane. Or there's this one guy standing right next to it taking a selfie with the elk.
Oh my gosh.
I was just like, oh my gosh, it's crazy. So yeah, it's really important. Like, hey, yes, this is a national park and this is how we treat this space. It's not a petting zoo.
I'm sure you've seen some crazy things. I know, we're all just shaking our heads. This is an audio podcast, but we're all shaking our heads and face palming.
Oh man, we did an episode not that long ago where we kind of talked about the stupid things that people do in national parks. And there were several items that happened in the Grand Canyon.
Oh, I bet.
Throwing things into the Grand Canyon or hitting things into the Grand Canyon.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm sure you've seen a bunch. But, you know, it gives you the opportunity to educate, which is helping people understand how important these places are is just one step of it, helping us to protect them better.
Speaking of dumb things to do in the Grand Canyon, I had a question. And for those listening, I did verify that Kelkiyana is a Star Wars fan before I said this. And so I was been thinking about this, stupid things to do in the Grand Canyon, but also different ways to experience it. As technology continues to get more Star Wars-y, would you ever support pod racing in the Grand Canyon?
I love that. Yes, I would support. As long as it's not impacting the natural and cultural resources, I'm all for it. I could totally see that happening.
Sweet. That's exactly what I was hoping for.
That'd be pretty epic. Oh my gosh.
So for watching episode 1, we have to make sure that we don't have the explosions and the crashes.
Yeah.
But the high speed excitement would be okay.
Yeah, exactly. No racers like Sebulba sabotaging the other racers and making them crash and stuff. So yeah, we can't allow that here in that.
Oh my gosh. Awesome. Okay. Well, I am going to tell Elon Musk that he needs to develop a pod racer, and we're going to go from there.
Yeah.
That's another part of SpaceX's job right now, because we have one ranger at least. We have one ranger on board.
Yeah, one.
And I'm so excited.
Yeah, I'm ready to support that.
So you mentioned all the different activities that you can do in the Grand Canyon, and we definitely have our favorites and some that we still need to do. But what would you say are some of your favorite things to do in the national park?
Yeah, one thing I'd really, really love is Hermit Road. So it's this road in the park. It's like a scenic drive that you can drive in the wintertime. But in the summer, you have to take the shuttle buses since it gets very congested. But there's all these viewpoints along it. And so I really like doing that, walking in the evening time especially. My favorite sunset spot is Mojave Point. I know Hopi Point gets all the credit all the time. And just so many people there. But if you just go to the next viewpoint over to Mojave Point, you still get that 360 view of the river, the canyon, and the sun setting in the west. So that's one of my favorite things to do, is to get out there whenever I can. You can also ride bikes out there. There's actually a bike path that goes out near Hermit's Rest, so people can rent like electric bikes or mechanical bikes. And so that's one of my favorite things. And then, of course, getting out to Desert View. I know the Watchtower was mentioned earlier. That's just a really special place. And they have some really stunning sunsets too. And being able to see the river. If you have binoculars or anything, you can look at the river and see the rafts going by sometimes. And then there's a lot of condor sightings out there too. So, and they have good ice cream, Desert View. So having the ice cream out there.
What more do you need?
Yeah, exactly. That's the life
Well,
there.
and I mean, you need to take some time to do the cultural demonstrations or take part in that too. Desert View is worth a few hours for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
We've never seen condors out there though.
Yeah, they're out there. And another popular condor spot is Hopi Point and the historic village area.
Okay. We did see one condor once at the Grand Canyon. It was a huge deal. And we're looking at it and we're like, that's a abnormally giant black bird, right? Like, my eyes aren't playing tricks on me, are they? It's like, that's like a human-sized bird, right?
Yeah, they're big.
Those birds are amazing.
So thanks for the tips. We'll have to bring binoculars when we go to Desert View next time. I don't know if we've done that.
Definitely.
Are there any rangers that like do what they did on like talk shows where they have like a zoo ranger that brings in a bunch of animals and they have like a hawk on his shoulder or anything? They ever have like a condor on a park ranger's shoulder? That would be cool.
Yeah, there's a guy who works as a volunteer, I believe. They call him Condor Bob.
Nice.
So, yeah, he's always out there with the tracker and stuff, and he talks to people. He knows every single thing you can know about condors. And he's stationed out at Hopi Point during the summertime.
Oh.
And then they have like the Hawk Watch team too. And so they're really cool to talk to and learn about different facts and things about the various birds, like the peregrine falcons and the condors. Yeah, that are here at the canyon.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
I totally thought you were going to say no. And then you said yes.
Yeah.
And then that was so cool. I want to meet Condor Bob.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh. So I love how you mentioned going to Mojave Point instead of Hopi Point for sunset. That's the type of stuff that I love to just have, for people to know if they're wanting to ditch those crowds, because the crowds at the South Rim especially can get so overwhelming sometimes, which I'm sure, you mentioned you love the North Rim. I think John and I both would be like, the North Rim, because it's just so much less crowded.
Yeah.
But if you're on the South Rim, where do you like to go to get away from the crowds?
Yeah, I would go with my same answer from earlier with the Hermit Road. There's various viewpoints along that way, and you don't even have to go to the viewpoints. There's so many between the viewpoints because the rim trail follows that whole area along the rim there. And that section's really nice because there's like picnic tables there, benches. So you can just find a nice spot where you're like overlooking the canyon and have that space to yourself. So that's what I would highly recommend.
Okay, so leaving Mojave and going towards the abyss. And the rim trail really is kind of one of those best kept secrets, I feel like, on the South Rim. Because like you said, if you don't even stop at those main viewpoints, but you walk a little further, like you can get such awesome views of the Grand Canyon, not from the viewpoint, and have it almost to yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And then for people who don't want to stick to the rim and want to actually get down into the canyon, I would recommend the South Kaibab Trail over the Bright Angel Trail. South Kaibab tends to be a little less traffic, but there is no water on that trail, so make sure you have water. And then once you get past Cedar Ridge, with the next viewpoint, I believe, is Skeleton Point and then the tip-off. Those are more strenuous hikes, but definitely less people in those spaces too, if you're looking for like a good day hike. There's also no shade on that trail. Sorry, I don't know I'm recommending this, but it's really beautiful. You get panoramic views of the canyon from there, because with the Bright Angel Trail, it's so popular. There's so many more families are on that, which is not a bad thing, but it's also in the Bright Angel Fault. So you should call it like a little side canyon in a way, to where you kind of see the same thing as you're hiking down, to where with South Kaibab, it's more exposed and you get out more into the canyon, if that makes any sense. So, yeah.
It makes sense. And I want to tell everybody, I want you to all pay attention to what Ranger Kelkiyana just said, because she just said exactly what I've been saying 10 years. Like, whenever people ask me, you know, South Kaibab versus Bright Angel, which one? And I'm always like, hands down, South Kaibab. Hands down. Like, if you can only do one, it's that one. For basically exactly all the same reasons you just said. The 360-degree views. You don't get like everybody hiking down just wondering kind of, oh, what's this trail? Where should we go? Because it's further from the main population area of the South Rim. And you have to take the shuttle out there. So it takes a little bit more work to get there. But yeah, I'm feeling very proud right now that you backed me up on this. I'm very happy about that, because I do think the South Kaibab is just phenomenal for all those reasons.
Yeah, for sure.
Plus the fact that there's no water along the trail, so it's a survival of the fittest kind of trail as well. And so if you don't plan, you're not making it out of the canyon. And so it's just meritocracy at its best. Right there.
Yep, exactly.
It adds that extra element. Oh my gosh. Well, all the trails that go below the rim at the Grand Canyon are like that. You know, it's like, it is kind of, it needs to weed out the people who aren't prepared a little bit on those, because, I mean, Grand Canyon has some of the most dangerous trails in the country. Yeah. Because of the elevation and the dryness and the lack of water and the lack of shade. I think a lot of people do just kind of get in over their heads on those trails very easily.
But something that's very funny, I do think that on the South Kaibab Trail, most of the people that do go down that trail are way more prepared, because some of the funniest experiences that we've had is on the Bright Angel Trail, where people are like in their flip-flops holding an ice cream cone in this hand and a beer in their other hand, and they're just, let's see how far I go.
Yeah.
We'll see.
I know I read an incident report from our law enforcement. There's this guy who was trying to hike to the river in Crocs, and he just had gummy bears. That's it.
Oh, no.
On the Bright Angel.
Oh, my gosh. How far did he make it?
I think he made almost all the way down until a ranger stopped him and made him turn back.
And they're like, a mule, please.
Oh, my gosh.
That's crazy.
I love that.
Oh, my word. Yeah, you do see that.
People.
I know. It's fun. It is. It's one of those other like fun quirks of the Grand Canyon is the people watching.
That's a bless their heart kind of a moment right there is what that is.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for being with us today. I just have one more question for you. As a nod to how much I love to trip plan and help people with their trip planning, what would you say is your number one tip for visiting Grand Canyon National Park?
So just being an interpretive ranger, every time people come to the visitor center desk and they ask us, what do we do here? Where do I go? And we're like, do you have your map with you? Do you have the brochure they give you, the entrance station? They're like, no, it's in the car. So that is definitely a tip that I have, is to always have your park map and brochure with you. And then speaking on another term, I always like to say to visit with respect, because pretty much every national park across the country is the ancestral territories of various indigenous tribes. And here at Grand Canyon, it is our home. Even though our people don't live here physically, we still have these living connections to this space. And I always like to end my park ranger programs with like, treat this space like you would your own home or a home of a loved one. And there's this quote from a Navajo woman that the park works with, Renee. She says, when you visit the canyon, you visit with prayers in your heart, purpose in your step, and then you leave it the way you found it. So that's my tip for visiting not just the Grand Canyon, but any landscape out there, is just treating the place with respect, because you know what you know, and these places all have stories and connections to who we are today. That's my advice.
Thank you. I don't think it could have been better said than that. And part of hoping to educate people about how beautiful and wonderful these national parks are, a big part of that is that we're able to help people have good experiences here so that they do come to respect that land and take care of it better. So thank you. That's a huge part of what we all need to do in these spaces. And we really appreciate you coming today and talking to us about all of the tribal programs that are going on in the Grand Canyon and the importance of respecting and treating the land well, because it's so important to so many people. So thank you so much, Kelkiyana, for joining us today. We're so grateful for you and wish you all the best with your upcoming national park season. It's going to start getting busy for you.
Oh, yeah. We're enjoying it now, and we'll see in a couple months' time. But thank you so much for having me. I really, really enjoyed this and meeting you both.
Well, I have to say, I thoroughly enjoyed that conversation with Kelkiyana.
Yeah, she has a really cool job, and what an interesting perspective.
Yes, and she pulled the word and name Sebulba right out of the air because she is a true Star Wars fan. And so I just want all the props, all the kudos that I can give her for being a real nerd, at least in Star Wars.
John's face was so surprised when she said that. I have to say, I was pretty surprised that she was like, oh yeah, pod racing through the Grand Canyon for sure. I was a little surprised by that.
Yeah.
Pleasantly surprised.
The Grand Canyon would be it'd be the perfect location for that type of an activity. So,
but what a cool perspective, right? And especially to hear about the cultural and the spiritual aspects of the Grand Canyon for all these people coming straight from the mouth of a park ranger and a tribal member.
Right.
So cool. So we want to say thank you to Kelkiyana for being interviewed. We really appreciate her time. And to say thank you to her and to the other tribal coordinators at the Grand Canyon, your task for today is something that you can't do right now, probably. But we really want you to add the Desert View Watchtower to your list of things to go and see and spend time at the Grand Canyon, just whenever you go.
It's such a unique place within the park and a great place to kind of bring a lot of this cultural talk together. And you can actually see it in action a lot of times. You know, they have these cultural demonstrations, they have dancers, they have artisans that come, and you can actually see, sometimes touch, I don't know, there's just a way to experience Native American culture here at the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, so put that on your list. If you see her when you go, even better, right?
Yes.
We're definitely going to look her up the next time we're in the Grand Canyon. But who knows? You might see her hanging around Desert View as well when you go. So just put that on your radar because it is a really important aspect of these national parks, specifically the Grand Canyon, you know, as she described to us. So say thank you by taking part in the learning process of why this is so important right now, and just go have fun at Desert View. It's a really cool place.
Yes. If you're enjoying the podcast, if you want us to do more ranger interviews, please leave us a review on whatever platform you're using. Leave us a 5-star review. It helps the podcast, but we sure appreciate your feedback, and we thank you so much for listening.
And don't forget to get some dirt in your shoes.